Welcome to another weekend here on the platform. My name is Sam Omashe. My column will be read to you shortly.
Thinker, worker, listener. The supporters of Abdullahi A. Sule may be gloating over his recent victory at the tribunal over his rival at the court. The double-A governor just felled his challenger to the high seat of governor of Nasarawa State. But the fellow has also fascinated this writer, as a few we have seen in the past, also a few in this dispensation. The man stands as a crossroads between the politician and the technocrat. In this era, we have another who I call the BOS of Lagos, Governor Babajide O. Sanwo-Olu. His acts are starting to arc like rainbow over the city. In earlier eras, we had Babatunde Raji Fashola, a senior advocate of Nigeria, the then governor of Example, and now the Trojan of Works. But unlike Fashola and Sanwo-Olu, Governor Sule soared into politics from the summit of corporate Nigeria. Fashola and Sanwo-Olu rode formidable credentials, but they happened on the political ring as uppercuts. Governor Sule anticipated the ring as a chest-beating wrestler. Yet, because he is from Nasarawa State, without the neon of lights and firmaments of the big city, some Nigerians will need to know that he is as good a technocrat as they came. His predecessor, the amiable Tanko Almakura, supported him ahead of the other contenders in his APC. That was because he knew what few knew. Many Nigerians find credentials boring. They may be bored to learn that though they call him engineer, he is actually one. He did not pass a mere technical exam and arrogated it to himself like many of such ilk who pass off as engineers in a society that bows to titles. They will know that he gained his first degree in mechanical technology and his master's degree in industrial technology from the Indiana State University in Terre Haute in the United States. But technocrats do not come in one package. A Godswill Akpabio is different from a Timipre Silva or a Sanwo-Olu, but technocrats are becoming an important part of modern democracy. The conflict, however, will continue to stalk governance and democracy in the near future, as it has since the invention of the term and concept in 1919. Some technocrats have done well in politics. Some of them have acted as naturals like Asiwaju Tinubu, Abiola Ajimobi. They are not without their Achilles heels, though, but they don't come in great numbers. But a politician who is not a good technocrat has no place in governance. What kind of a technocrat Governor Sule will be in politics is beginning to show in his first 100 days. He is beaming as a nurturer, while he wants to follow the path of all responsible governors who would not abandon a predecessor's project just to stamp an individual imprimatur. He is showing he wants to train as a means of empowering. He is not one to make a nanny state where all depend on government handouts. Governor Sule is focusing on training across the strata. He is doing that while giving sewing and grinding machines to the youth and women and setting up training schools in the state. But he knows he must do that in the context of a bigger picture, like constructing technology innovation hubs. He has set the tone for the old by paying pensions. He is focusing on commerce and economic empowerment. It is still early days, but he has seen himself as a uniter in spirit, a man who sees no contradiction between Islam and Christianity, having grown up a Muslim but attended a Catholic school. This is the skill that he will have to bring into play to make the technocrat in him into a mandate, not just in polls, but in the people's heart. For a technocrat to succeed in politics, he has to bring a sort of drama into his acts. Awo began as a great politician. He ended a statesman who was more of a technocrat. That accounted for his inability to expand his base beyond his home region. He is Nigeria's best leader ever. But he was a statesman first, which is the best virtue. As James Clark noted, a politician thinks of the next election, a statesman of the next generation. That was Awu. We need the thinker first, then the worker, then the listener. As the prophet Isaiah said, here a little, there a little. This three-part goal is what Governor Sule is cultivating. So far, so good.
Well, you have been frustrated by a particular case you're pursuing right now, the case of Navy holding about 120 citizens in places like Warri, Port Harcourt,
Lagos and
Abuja.
No, I'm not frustrated. I'm so familiar with the system that I cannot be frustrated. And I have my own way of getting justice ultimately for my clients. In the case you have referred to, I can say, right now, that based on my persistent complaints, the federal government has ordered the Navy to either charge those guys, arraign them in court, or release them. And that process began last week.
Now, but what is the basis for that? If you had not gone into this matter, so the 120 people, for what reason? About 150, okay, yeah. 150 people, for what reason?
You know, under our system, because of ignorance, because the government knows that people have no idea about their rights. So on a daily basis, people are arrested on our highways for wandering. Whereas the vagrancy law was abolished in Nigeria in 1989. 30 years ago. But people are still arrested. But if you get to the station, by the way, I cannot be arrested for wandering. Oh, the police will look at you. What do you mean? So you know that you are not supposed to be arrested for wandering. The charge may be changed. Or you are released so that the business can go on. But we're trying to produce pamphlets, leaflets, and circulate so that people can have knowledge and understanding of their basic rights. The late fella Nicola Pokuchi once waxed a record where he said, slap me so that I could become rich. For many years, I never really understood
what he meant, yeah.
But I then asked him one day, what informed your decision to sing that way? He said, no. I was driving around Mushin and, we had a small traffic problem. And a big man wanted to slap me. Yeah. Came out of his Mercedes-Benz car and raised up his hand. As soon as he was told, oh, fella,
he took back his hand.
Now, what fella was saying was that
if he dared,
if you had slapped me,
that was a court case.
Enriched me, I would have gone to court to ask for damages.
Yes.
No, we need our people to know that if somebody slaps you, don't turn the other cheek. No. Don't fight him or her. Go to court and ask for damages so that will not be done again.
The P and ID case, yeah. The PI and D case, as I call it, process and industrial development case. I think there's been a judgment that they were involved in some malfeasance here, just ahead of that. Didn't you think that there was something fundamentally wrong with those who do justice on the official level, that they had to wait for the $9.6 billion conviction before waking up?
No, if you look at the facts and circumstances of that unfortunate case, you will come to the irresistible conclusion that it was a package of fraud, ab initio. That was the whole idea.
Package of fraud.
Now,
by?
If by the federal government.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
If you recall at the material time, the president of the republic, the late President Umaru Yar'Adua, was in a state of coma.
Yes. It was between heaven and earth.
In an undisclosed hospital in Saudi Arabia. Not only was that contract approved illegally by a cabal at the material time, even the budget of the country was forged. I mean, somebody just left here, oh, we are taking the appropriation bill to the president for his assent, and they now came back and said he has signed. And he wasn't in a position to sign at the material time. So many contracts were concluded and purportedly executed at that material time on behalf of the president and the country. So that was where this started. Later, the case went to court. A judgment was given. It was never defended under the Jonathan regime. The Buhari regime took over. Again, it was the same lackadaisical attitude. As a matter of fact, and this is disturbing, the most disturbing aspect of the judgment, the award of the tribunal was questioned and set aside by the Federal High Court by the Honorable Justice Mohammed Buba in Lagos. The judgment was taken to the UK, and the arbitrator said, sorry, we don't recognize the judgment of the Nigerian courts. You will have expected a country
to assert
that recognizes its own sovereignty, its own legitimacy, its own independence as a country, to say, sorry, we are no longer participating. But Nigeria went on.
They didn't even have good representation.
To participate in further proceedings. No, to be honest, Nigeria had good lawyers under the Buhari regime.
Yeah, before then.
But the approach was problematic. The approach was problematic. When you are dealing with gangsters, you cannot be so civilized as was the case, which is why people are alleging malfeasance. For instance, when the company ran into crisis in pursuing the case, he decided to hire a chief justice, a former chief justice of the country, who wrote a legal opinion to defend that the contract was valid and sacrosanct and binding on Nigeria. Any tribunal, any court in the world will give
weight of evidence,
weight and consideration, serious weight, to the evidence and the legal opinion of a former chief justice of a country.
Now, we are talking about legal justice. We're talking about human rights justice as well. And you also are pursuing the idea of children who are not given opportunity to go to school. This is not just human rights justice. It's not just legal justice. It's also social justice. So how can we correct this kind of thing? Because the statistics show, even from UNICEF, that we have millions of them, over 13 million.
16 million. 16
million.
Yeah.
Who are out of school, and it grows every year.
Yeah.
And in a country where we have Boko Haram, where we have banditry, where we have unemployment, this is a ticking time bomb.
Yeah. Now, our training as lawyers has drawn a line of dichotomy between political and civil rights, right, on the one hand, and socio-economic rights on the other. The ruling class in Nigeria deliberately entrenched socio-economic rights in Chapter 2 of the Constitution under the pretext that, they are under the pretext that you have fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy, whose provisions cannot be enforced. They are not justiciable. But political and civil rights are in Chapter 4. You can enforce those rights. And before you can enforce those rights, you must have the economic wherewithal. Everybody has the freedom of expression. But if you are an illiterate, how do you express yourself? Everybody has a right to life. If you are sick and you cannot access basic health, so where is the right to life? So those rights in Chapter 4, for the majority of our people, are hollow and shallow. So, and that is why the Constitution has provided for socio-economic rights. But the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which has been enacted into law in Nigeria, has gone beyond that by abolishing the dichotomy. So, by virtue of Article 17 of the African Charter, right to education, we got a judgment as far back as 2009. SERAP approached the ECOWAS court, and we got judgment to defend that every child shall be educated in Nigeria. We have the Child's Right Law, which has been adopted by majority of the state. Unfortunately, 11 states in the north have not adopted the Child's Right Law. And majority of those states are now taken over by terrorists and bandits, understandably, and kidnappers.
We have cultural impediments to this.
There's no cultural impediment. Those who are alleging, those who are saying we cannot enact the Child's Right Law because it's against our religion or culture, are dishonest with profound respect.
Because their children go to school
Their
abroad.
children go to school at home and abroad.
Yeah.
Expensive schools.
Expensive
now,
schools.
and none of them will allow their child to be married out to anybody under 20, under 18. Or 20. Yet, you are promoting child marriage for the poor. No, that cannot continue.
It's still a bugbear. It's still a difficulty because it is not just that we have to think from our head, because what you are doing now is that we are thinking from our head, but the sentiment is still strong among the poor, because you have to make the poor understand that this is what they really need to do for their own children.
No, don't blame the victims of injustice in our country. Because in every,
but we have to make them realize justice.
In every society, the ideas of the ruling class prevail. It is the duty of the government, using an organization like NOAA, National Orientation Agency, the NTA, and other media, public media, private media, to educate our people and enlighten them to appreciate that they need to put their children in school so that they can acquire education.
But this will take some time because not many of them are doing it. Many of them even have their heart in it.
No, some education is going on. I mean, for instance, when people say, oh, it's against our religion, we also tell them, in many Islamic countries, in countries that...
Education is compulsory.
Yeah, compulsory.
In UAE, in Saudi Arabia.
Of course, in Iran.
In Iran, yeah.
Right now,
yes.
The West is having problems with Iran because it has developed its nuclear power. You know,
it's a very tricky situation because we all know that even in a Western region where Awolowo was a premier, where there were no hang-ups about my child, there's a religion and so on, Awolowo faced stiff resistance just to send the children to school because
of course.
They said, oh, my child has to go to farm, my child has to do this, we have to survive. We still have that kind of sentiment even in the Southwest today.
But you see, no, even then, it was a war.
It was a war, yes.
But the government persisted. And they were, must note, religious institutions. They were committed to the development of the society, came in. Go and find out in any of the towns in the Southwest where people talk about free education under the Awo regime. The regime probably had 1 or 2 schools. Local government authority primary schools. The bulk of the schools, majority of the schools, were established by
missionaries,
particularly the Catholics, the Anglican, the Baptists, and the Methodists.
Yes.
Unfortunately now, the new generation of churches, you know, particularly some of the Pentecostal churches, established schools
For
which
the
the
rich,
children of
the poor cannot
majority of the congregation cannot
attend.
access. So again, we have to get the members of such religious institutions, Christian, Muslim, to appreciate that money generated from those institutions.
Are you going to go to court for that?
No, it's a question of getting the government to enforce the law. You know, every church or mosque registered under the law,
Yeah.
right? Under CAMA, the Company Analyze Matters
Act.
are supposed to be charitable organizations. So you can't take more money from charity to
And
establish
use
a
something
business.
for profit.
So there is a problem there.
Yeah.
So once we can mobilize the government to enforce the law, that problem will
They're
be
getting
solved.
into a territory that even governments are afraid to go into.
No, you see, the government has to be made to appreciate its responsibility. So instead of suing churches and mosques, it is the government that has to be sued to enforce the law.
Is it much a problem of government or the problem of the political class?
No, the government is
It's the political class.
controlled by the political class.
Yes, the political class has to come to grips with it first because they feel that they have certain obligations and fidelities to the religious order.
No, in fairness to many of the leaders of the religious institutions who are quite enlightened, who are quite educated, they also know that you cannot operate your church or mosque in South Africa without paying appropriate taxes. So if the government decides to enforce the law here,
There's been a fight.
Just
There's been a fight in the U.S., for instance, about the tax-exempt status of churches in the U.S.
Of course.
But the churches themselves are also, it's a perennial battle in which the churches are trying to say we are tax-exempt, whatever we do in charity.
No, most countries now will not tax a charitable organization because you are helping the people. But the moment you divert the money
into
to
schools,
business ventures, establishing schools and universities where you collect
fees,
there is a problem.
You also note that a lot of the problems with this disparity in the numbers of out-of-school children are in the north.
Yes.
So, and that is because of the Almajiri system that has created so many of them who have no parents to answer to. Now it becomes very difficult because they actually answer to some scholars who they take care of. And some people believe that even the Almajiri system is a kind of a mini economic unit.
No, Sam, no, Sam. There are problems of the government. You see, and that was the point I was making yesterday about the harassment of activists. You can't have a government that is negotiating with bandits and terrorists, bribing them with public funds, and granting them amnesty.
And think that you have not created another band of another economy, underground economy.
And you now go out there and you tell me there's no money to educate people. A government that is, or government that are sponsoring mass marriages, sending people to Mecca and Jerusalem every year at colossal cost. You can't say there's no money to educate the poor. the children of the poor.
There's
But
always-
if we continue to leave the children of the poor on the street, right, we're already in trouble. They also graduate to terrorists and bandits and kidnappers. I mean, look at the government. You have just said last week or so that the Federal Executive Council has increased VAT. So your paper wrote an editorial on it, but you are dancing around it. You're talking about morality of it or the timing. No! Sam, we are not under a military dictatorship. There is no taxation without legislation in a democratic government. So it's not, the Federal Executive Council has no powers to increase any tax in Nigeria. So if it's not just an ordinary bill, the president has to prepare a money bill which should be submitted to the National Assembly. And the National Assembly will have to conduct public hearing to find out whether there are alternatives.
Yeah. You've gone back to the issue of the founding of America. No taxation without representation. Without representation.
But here, no taxation without legislation.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you very much. You've had Barrister Femi Falana, always an interesting engagement anytime on this show. Thank you very much for being with Big Talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Just before the program ends, this is my poem in honor of Leah Sharibu.
Don't you fret, don't you let the moment ferry you away. Sip joy in your tormentor's spree, clutch its glee. Try to be spry, time after time. Nestle in the nettles, and remember, nectar is sweet in the wild.
Thank you for watching the program today. You can catch up with my published columns on www.samomashaye.com. Also follow me on Twitter. My handle is @SamOmashaye. And until next time, be good.